Hi, I'm Jack, the founder of Inflatable Kayaking Group in Portland, Oregon. This video is the addendum to the previous video that I made about how to choose an inflatable kayak. That video became way more popular than I expected. I really appreciate all the feedback and support. I also appreciate criticism and corrections. I made that video mostly for the members of my group, but it became far more popular than I expected. All of a sudden, I feel like I'm a kind of an ambassador of inflatable kayaks. I see many comments stating that people made decisions based on what I had to say. It's great to hear, and it also makes me want to be really sure that what I'm saying helps people. Also, I can imagine it might have real impact on different manufacturers by taking business away from some and giving it to others. While I'm not affiliated with any of them in any way, I sure don't want people to lose their income. Yet I believe it's their responsibility to make products that serve people well in order to succeed. My ultimate loyalty in making these videos is to you, my viewers and kayakers. I really want to make sure that I give my viewers the best advice I can. And I also want to remind you that this is just a hobby of mine. I'm not a professional kayaker. I've just been doing it a lot lately, and I have a bit of a kayak hoarding problem. I don't want to make money on kayaks. Some people wanted to brainstorm for me how to get revenue from this work, and while I appreciate the support and intention, it's absolutely not my intention. I like this area to be the place where I spend money and enjoy without the pressure of selling anything. Releasing that video and trying to keep up with the comments sure taught me more things about kayaks and about kayakers. I feel that there is more to be shared. First thing I discovered is that I was a little behind on the state of the kayaking market, and there are some really interesting developments. Something I'm really excited about is that there are a number of fully drop-stitch inflatable kayaks that are hitting the market. It's something I've been anticipating and welcoming for a while. As much as I love Sea Eagle Razor Light, I want to see it have some serious competition. And as the competition heats up, I want to see the prices go down. I'm hoping to get my hands on models of other makes and test and compare them for you. Second huge trend I completely missed is the fact that all the Category 1 kayaks that I was advocating as an affordable means to test the waters have been in such high demand and short supply that they're just either unavailable or their prices are insane. I went on eBay and found insane price gouging. There are $100 kayaks that are being pushed for $500 or more. And what's worse, it appears that people are buying them. I want to be really clear. Those kayaks are really not worth that kind of money, and there's no way to justify that kind of prices. Those are just unethical sellers trying to sell Category 1 kayaks for Category 2 prices. Even with the drying issue, I'd take a Category 2 kayak over Category 1 if I had to pay the same amount. Intex Challenger has been affected perhaps the least. Its price only about doubled. I was able to find them for about $150 on eBay, but knowing that normally they sell for about $70, I'd still be hesitant to buy one of those. Sea Eagle 370, for example, I personally considered overpriced at $250, but I could really not justify any more than $300 for it. As much as I love Sea Eagle, I think their cheap kayaks, the 330 and 370, are not worth the hype and are not as good as Intex Excursion Pro, which would normally be cheaper. Of course, its prices skyrocketed as well, and now the lowest I found it was $340. And so I see how many people who are considering buying their first kayak are finding themselves making more difficult decisions than I described in my previous video, since buying a cheap kayak might not be an option right now. I imagine this craziness will subside once the summer season is over. Meanwhile, if you're looking to buy something now, I don't think that buying a crazy overpriced Category 1 kayak is the best solution. I'd consider renting kayaks for now, buying Category 3 or 2 kayak, or looking for a deal on used one, although I imagine they will be pretty sparse until the winter as well. I also want to remind and stress that Category 1 kayaks that normally cost $100 are not great seaworthy vessels. I discourage people from using them for cold weather, rough conditions, camping, and other scenarios where your life depends on them. There were a couple of comments from people who seemed experienced and said that they have witnessed kayakers with inflatables get in trouble because they were too slow and unable to get back to safety. They advocated not using inflatables at all. I think that outlook misses the general picture, but they have a point. Most people seem to get it, but here's a message to the adrenaline junkies who really like to push their luck. Water happens to be a deceptively dangerous element that does kill a lot of people every year. And inflatable kayaks in general are not meant for hardcore sea adventures. They won't be able to go to the same places where hard shells go. So I realized that I would like to alter the wording on the graphics I made for Category 3 kayaks from anything to heavy recreation, and apologize for any messaging I might have made that made it sound like if you have Category 3 kayak, you're invincible. Have respect for water. Don't push your luck and learn to evaluate conditions to stay safe. I'm also learning that many people want to discuss brands. A lot. And some brands wanted to chime in too. I picked up a bit of a heated conversation with Advanced Elements in the comments there. They were trying to unsuccessfully convince me that their boats drive better than how I described them. And in the end, they agreed that I was correct. Or at least that's how I interpreted that interaction. On the bright side, I'm really excited that they are starting to producing fully drop-stitch kayaks. I would love to test one of them soon and really hope that it's good and can compete with Razorlight. That whole interaction made me examine my own and people's relationships with brands. There are two interesting currents happening that are worth pointing out. One, people buy kayaks because they like the brand. And second is people like the brand because they bought their kayak. It seems obvious. We develop brand loyalties all the time. But I think it's important to remember not just like blindly any brands just because we own their products. For example, I love Honda, and that's what I drive. And that's okay. But I'm really careful to stay objective towards them and not get in the mindset of associating their products with my identity. If I get to the place where driving a Honda defines who I am, I'm headed to wasting my emotional energy defending that their products are the best, because admitting otherwise would reflect negatively on me. That's the trap I hope to avoid. What products you choose might or might not say something about you, but they don't define you. I encourage you to not get attached to brand names on that level. And I think it goes beyond kayaking. At the same time, it's perfectly fine to like brands and believe that their products are superior to others. Just don't lose your own identity in those comparisons. Based on comments, I see that companies like NRS, Air, Innova, Sea Eagle seem to have a ton of fans who just love their products. And that's great. It tells me that they are making good products. Just remember to remember who you are, even if you own 6 Air kayaks. You are not defined by them. That brings me to another one of manufacturers I mentioned, Sevylor. That brand does not have nowhere near as many fans as others that I know. However, I was a little surprised to find out that they nonetheless exist. People were wondering what made me judge them so harshly. So here it is. The first Sevylor kayak that we had in one of our group paddles at first was just slow and unable to track well, but it was tolerable. However, after a mile, it became almost impossible to move. We ended up having it pinned between 2 kayaks with 4 people on the sides paddling and moving really slowly back. When we got to the dock and tried to pull it out of the water, we discovered we can't. It took on probably between 50 and 100 gallons of water underneath the protective fabric, and that's why it acted as a barrel that could not be moved. Next one was just unable to go straight at all. It had no skeg of any sort and would just spin like crazy. A few more I witnessed were just unacceptably slow. None of the kayaks of this brand I've seen have performed even on par with the cheapest Intex, which is a shame. Apparently they're one of the pioneers of inflatable kayaks, and I feel bad that their products don't live up to my expectations. I don't wish them anything bad. I just wish well to my viewers. According to the comments, some people have found that they do have decent models that might perform well, but apparently those are sold in Europe, not the States. One way or another, I've seen way too many unacceptable kayaks from this brand to not want to gamble with them at all. If you want to go on an adventure of discovering their good models, best of luck to you. To me, it seems like the odds are stacked way against you. I don't see a point of risking it while there are so many good kayaks out there. Another thing I realized I don't care that much about is the weight of a kayak. I just happen to be pretty strong, and it was never a consideration for me. But for many people, it definitely makes a difference whether their kayak weighs 20 pounds or 35. In that regard, Category 1 kayaks will be by far the lightest, and fully drop-stitch boats are heaviest and most bulky when folded. That's another advantage of paddling with someone and using tandem kayaks. It's much easier to carry it with two people, and will take less space than two single kayaks. By the way, the thing I observe people do with their kayaks that I would strongly advise against: don't put anything heavy, like your backpack, into the kayak and then carry it by their handles. The handle and seams around it might not be meant to handle that kind of weight. Same with pulling the kayak onto the shore while someone's in it. Be gentle with those handles. Also, dragging kayaks on the ground. I see people do it surprisingly a lot. I would not do it at all, including landing. When you get back to shore, don't run into the shore at full speed. Slow down with your paddles right before you're about to hit it and gently touch on. Oh, and another big thing, don't overinflate your boat. I know it's tempting to make it feel stiffer, but in my experience, it's the most common cause of major failure in inflatable kayaks. Many kayaks don't give you a lot of options to gauge pressures, and you end up doing it by the feel. Read the manual from the manufacturer on how to gauge the proper inflation. You might learn something new, and maybe buy a pressure gauge. On high pressure kayaks, I stay 1 psi below max pressure, just in case. That seems to work pretty well. People were also wondering about paddling tandem kayaks alone and whether it was easy. I personally find it quite easy and have done it quite a bit. That's something I did not mention that I like about tandem kayaks. They might be perfect for one person to load all the camping gear into and paddle by themselves. If you don't have a lot of gear with you, you just want to move the seat closer to the middle of the kayak for better weight distribution. And also, a lot of kayaks that are called tandem are more like 1.5 person kayaks. With two people in them, they are quite cramped. But with one person and some gear, they might be perfect. Overall, if a kayak is about 13 feet or so and it's a tandem, consider it 1.5 person. If it's 16 feet, then it's a truly double, and you might fit a good amount of gear in addition to two people into it. Another topic is kayak sagging, heavier paddles, and pressures. These three are intertwined. My tandem advanced elements sagged under my 180 pounds. Kayak weight rating is generally calculated by assuming that it's evenly distributed across the length of the boat, but obviously that's not how it's distributed in real life. If you weigh about 250 pounds or more, you have more considerations in the choice of the kayak. I'd say pretty much any thin Category 1 boats are not an option. Intex Excursion Pro might be able to handle something like that, but ideally, you'd go with higher pressure kayaks. As we look at the higher end inflatables, we'll see that the pressures at which they're meant to operate is higher than the lower end ones. That makes them more stiff and efficient. Drop stitch kayaks are the highest pressure ones. To distribute the weight better, I'd say that having at least a drop stitch floor in a kayak is a great idea. Drop stitch floors in general are actually quite great, even if you don't weigh a lot. I found that many people had quite a bit of attachment to having foot supports and consider it important. I assume it boils down to personal body mechanics. I've tried to paddle with and without foot supports and found that they don't give me any advantages. So I don't bother using them. Most higher end kayaks have some kind of foot supports. Intex Excursion Pro has fancy footrest that comes with it. I did not bother testing it, but perhaps I will sometime soon. A few words about paddles. A number of people ask for a review on paddles. I won't go that far, but here are my basic thoughts. Some of the most important attributes of a paddle are its length and weight. Length is easy to figure. Most inflatables are wide, so you'll need a longer paddle. Most of the paddles I own and lend to the people I take on water are 230 to 240 centimeters long. That seems to be about the right length for most inflatables. If you have a narrower kayak, you might go with a 220 centimeter paddle or so. Also, your height is apparently a factor in sizing of a paddle. Here's a little chart that is supposed to help. When it comes to the weight though, hopefully you have a store that sells watercraft and paddles in your area. In our city, the best I know is called Next Adventure Paddle Sports. Going to a place like that and just getting to hold paddles with your hands will give you a good idea on how the weight and the price are inversely correlated. You'll really notice how the lighter the paddle, the more expensive it is. Ultimately, you'll just find the best balance that I suspect will be mostly driven by how much money feels right to you to spend on. Lighter paddles makes a difference, especially on longer outings, since your shoulders don't have to work as hard. Make sure the paddle feels solid when put together, the connections don't have any play, and don't get paddles that fold more than necessary. There are paddles that break down into 4 pieces. Unless you're planning on loading it into a backpack or ride a bicycle with it or fly on airplanes, you probably don't need that. The fewer connections, the better. It makes it lighter and sturdier. There is more you can learn on paddles by finding articles online, but this should be about enough. I was just warning you that the paddles that come with $100 kayaks are probably not great. But on a second thought, use them. And if you still want to go on the water after that, your experience will only be improving from there on. If you're enjoying a really crappy kayak with a junk of a paddle and a pump that takes twice as long as a good pump, just imagine how much you'll be enjoying the water when you upgrade to better equipment. Some higher-end kayaks come with great paddles, like my Advanced Elements Razorlight I got with fiberglass paddles that work quite well. Perhaps there is a value to doing learning by your own experience and not just taking my word for it. If you know what crappy is, you might better appreciate what you have. One thing I sure do recommend is to wear gloves when paddling. It really helps to prevent calluses and keeping your hands feeling good. One more topic I want to touch on today is Packrafts. What it is an inflatable watercraft that is designed for hikers and backpackers to cross lakes, rivers, and other bodies of water. Their key is being super light and small when packed. They're significantly more compact than even the lightest inflatable kayaks. I'm really curious to get one of those on the water and test them out, but so far I did not have a chance to get my hands on any of them. Hope it's pretty obvious that they have lower performance than pretty much any kayak. They won't go fast, nor will they track well, and that's okay. They're not meant to be performance vessels. The fact that something that weighs less than 10 pounds in your backpack can get you across a river while you're backpacking is really impressive by itself. And finally, I want to touch on inflatable stand-up paddleboards. I mentioned them and compared them to kayaks in the previous video. While I believe everything I said about them there, I do want to add that they're really fun for splashing by the beach, swimming off, sunbathing on them, or doing yoga. I ended up getting one of them and have taken it with me when I went to the beach with friends. It provided a really fun and entertaining platform to play with friends in the water. It's easy to dive off and get back onto. Trying to get 5 people on it and balance it is immensely fun. So if you're looking for a splashing beach toy for groups of people, it's wonderful. Thank you for watching and happy paddling.